We are here to talk about what truly matters.
I have to interject here, with all due respect.
The future of our nation depends on clear vision, not empty promises.
5 interruptions, 1 explosive comeback. What happened on live TV left millions speechless. The cameras were rolling, the lights glaring, and the audience at home had no idea they were about to witness a showdown that would dominate headlines for days. Bill O'Reilly sat forward, his trademark smirk fixed in place, confident that his usual barrage of interruptions would once again drown out his opponent. Across from him, Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett leaned in with measured calm, eyes steady, lips pressed into a line that suggested both patience and fire. From the very first question, the imbalance was clear. O'Reilly cut her off once, twice, 3 times, each interruption sharper, more dismissive than the last. Viewers watching could feel the tension rise, a wave of outrage swelling as Crockett tried to get a word in, only to be silenced again and again. 4 times, 5 times. But then came the pause. That fleeting moment when Crockett drew in a deep breath, held her gaze, and prepared to deliver the response that would shatter the rhythm of the debate and flip the script on live television. The silence before her words was electric. And when she finally spoke on her 6th attempt, the world would never forget it. For decades, Bill O'Reilly had built his name on aggression. He was the master of the interruption, the self-appointed arbiter of truth who cut off challengers mid-sentence and declared victory before the conversation had even begun. His style wasn't about dialogue, it was about dominance, and in countless encounters it worked. Opponents stumbled, audiences grew frustrated, and O'Reilly walked away with the last word. That night he expected nothing different. But across from him sat someone unlike the usual guests he bulldozed. Jasmine Crockett, the freshman congresswoman from Texas, wasn't a celebrity seeking airtime or a pundit hoping to promote a book. She was a fighter born of struggle, a voice that carried the weight of her community and the resilience of her roots. To many, she was the underdog, the newcomer stepping into the lion's den. And O'Reilly was all too eager to play the role of the lion. The national climate made the stakes higher than ever. America was restless, divided, weary of bluster and arrogance parading as truth. Millions of viewers tuned in not just for another debate, but for a reflection of the broader struggle, whose voice gets heard and whose gets silenced. On that stage, it wasn't just O'Reilly versus Crockett, it was the establishment versus the rising generation, arrogance versus authenticity, dismissal versus dignity. Every interruption sharpened the sense that this was bigger than a single broadcast. People watching at home leaned forward, frustration mounting, anticipation building. Crockett's calm restraint wasn't weakness, it was strategy, patience, timing. She was waiting for the moment to strike. And when that moment came, it would ignite a wave that no interruption could ever smother. What unfolded that night wasn't just another sparring match, it would become the clip that defined her career, the one answer that transformed a debate into a movement. Bill O'Reilly didn't just host television. For years he ruled it. The stage was his courtroom, his coliseum, his throne. He cultivated the image of a man who spoke for the people, the no-nonsense voice who claimed to cut through spin. But anyone who had ever sat across from him knew the truth. O'Reilly wasn't interested in dialogue, he was interested in control. His brand was interruption. He would pounce mid-sentence, slicing through carefully constructed points with a raised hand, a sharp, "Hold it," or a booming voice that made his guests appear flustered. He turned silencing into a strategy, and for too long it worked. Politicians, activists, even seasoned journalists walked away rattled, defeated not by reason but by volume. What made it worse was the contradiction. O'Reilly wrapped himself in the rhetoric of fair and balanced debate, insisting that he simply wanted answers. Yet time and again, when an opponent attempted to deliver those answers, he cut them short. It was less debate than domination, less truth-seeking than power play. For viewers who craved substance, it was maddening. For those who wanted justice, it was a reminder of how easily power could drown out truth. The arrogance became part of the show. He smirked when guests stumbled. He leaned back when they grew flustered, as if savoring the spectacle. To his loyal audience, he was a fearless fighter. To critics, he was a bully in a tailored suit. But either way, O'Reilly thrived on the clash. Every interruption reinforced his persona as the man who could not be matched. And yet, arrogance breeds blindness. O'Reilly had grown so accustomed to steamrolling his opponents that he failed to notice when the ground beneath him began to shift. A new generation of leaders was rising, leaders who didn't rattle so easily, who carried themselves with poise born not of television lights but of real struggle. Leaders who saw through the theatrics and refused to play by his script. That night, Bill O'Reilly leaned once again on his old playbook. Cut off, dismiss, overpower. He believed he was untouchable, that one more opponent would crumble under the weight of his interruptions, but he had no idea his usual tactics were about to backfire. Jasmine Crockett's journey to that studio was anything but ordinary. She didn't rise from the polished corridors of elite privilege, nor was her voice handed a microphone by established networks. Her voice was forged in courtrooms and community halls, sharpened by battles that most Americans never see but feel every day. Before Congress, she was a public defender, standing beside those society often tried to forget, people without money, without influence, without power. Every case taught her something about dignity in the face of dismissal. She learned how to argue under pressure, how to fight when the odds were stacked against her, and how to remain calm when every word could change a life. Those years left her with more than a resume, they left her with resilience. In Texas politics, she carried that same fire, unafraid to clash with those who underestimated her. Opponents discovered quickly that Crockett's sharp tongue was matched only by her sharper intellect. She could dismantle an argument with one line, expose hypocrisy with a single question. Her reputation spread, a fighter, yes, but also a truth-teller who spoke with clarity when others chose noise. That contrast was what made her so magnetic. She didn't need to shout to be heard. She didn't need theatrics to command attention. Her strength was composure, her weapon was truth, and that truth carried the weight of lived experience, of community struggles, of immigrant dreams, of families who saw in her a reflection of their own resilience. To her supporters, she was more than a politician. She was proof that authenticity could survive in the halls of power, that honesty could still cut through the fog, and to her critics she was a problem precisely because she refused to be silenced. All of that, the courtroom grit, the community battles, the political sharpness, was carried into the studio that night. Across from Bill O'Reilly, it wasn't just two people trading words, it was two worlds colliding, one built on arrogance and interruption, the other on endurance and truth. And that night, everything she had prepared for would collide on air. The first interruption came swiftly. Crockett had barely begun to outline her opening point when O'Reilly sliced across her words with a booming, "Answer the question." She paused, offered a patient smile, and tried again, but the rhythm was broken, and O'Reilly leaned back in his chair as though victory had already been secured. The second interruption landed harder. Crockett drew breath, began to clarify her position, and again O'Reilly cut in, this time with a mocking laugh, shaking his head, drowning her voice beneath his own. Millions watching could feel the imbalance, the unfairness of watching a woman attempt to speak while a man determined she would not. The third interruption carried the sting of arrogance. Crockett's words gained momentum, building toward a point when O'Reilly waved his hand dismissively. "You're dodging," admitted. Viewers at home gritted their teeth. The Congresswoman sat straighter, refusing to rise to the bait. By the fourth interruption, the tension was unbearable. Crockett's patience was tested, her composure remarkable. O'Reilly pressed harder, cutting across her with volume rather than reason. Comment sections lit up in real time. "Let her speak." "Why won't he let her finish?" The fifth interruption was the sharpest yet, delivered with a sneer. O'Reilly raised his voice, demanding answers to questions she had already begun to answer. Crockett's calm restraint in that moment was almost surreal. She placed her hands neatly on the desk, steadied her gaze, and waited. Viewers leaned forward, practically pleading for her to strike back. It was no longer just an interview, it was a power struggle, a test of dignity under fire. O'Reilly had thrown interruption after interruption, certain that dominance alone would secure his win. But Crockett was not flustered, she was not broken, she was waiting. On the sixth attempt, she leaned forward, and that's when everything changed. The studio seemed to hold its breath. Crockett leaned forward, her posture no longer defensive but commanding, her eyes locked on O'Reilly with a calm fire that pierced through the bluster. For the first time all night, he didn't interrupt. The pause itself was cinematic, an invisible shift in power as millions of viewers sensed something monumental was about to break. Her voice cut through the silence, steady and deliberate. "You've interrupted me 5 times, Mr. O'Reilly. 5 times you tried to stop me from finishing a thought, and yet here we are, because I still have something to say." The words landed like a gavel strike. O'Reilly shifted in his chair, forcing a chuckle, but the chuckle felt nervous, hollow. Crockett pressed forward. She spoke of respect, of the right to be heard, of how too often voices like hers, women, people of color, working-class fighters, were dismissed not because they lacked truth, but because those in power feared that truth. Facts followed conviction. She laid out her point with precision, weaving statistics and lived reality into a narrative so tight that it could not be interrupted without exposing weakness. Viewers at home felt the walls of the debate tilt. Suddenly O'Reilly wasn't the judge, he was the defendant, squirming under the weight of her composure. "Millions of Americans," she continued, "wake up every day fighting just to be heard. And if you can't allow me a few minutes to speak the truth on your stage, then maybe it's not me you're afraid of, maybe it's the truth itself." That line detonated across the broadcast. The audience at home erupted, living rooms filled with cheers, phones lit up with messages, timelines flooded, hashtags ignited within minutes, #let her speak, #Crockett mic drop. Clips circulated before the segment was even finished. Producers, usually stone-faced behind the glass, exchanged glances. They knew they were witnessing viral history. O'Reilly tried to regain control, opening his mouth to interject, but the words caught. He stammered, his trademark authority slipping as the camera caught the flicker of unease in his eyes. His glance downward, the slight fidget of his hands, signs of a man realizing the spotlight no longer belonged to him. For viewers who had endured interruption after interruption, the catharsis was overwhelming. Crockett hadn't just spoken for herself, she had spoken for them. Millions felt as if she had voiced the frustration of every silenced conversation, every dismissed opinion, every stolen moment of dignity. And when she leaned back, her point delivered, the studio was transformed. The blustering bully had been met with calm truth, and the balance of power had shifted live before the nation's eyes. Justice had been served in the form of one unflinching answer, and the shockwaves were only just beginning. The moment the segment ended, the internet exploded. Within minutes, clips of Jasmine Crockett's unshakable answer flooded social media feeds. Hashtags like #CrockettMicDrop and #LetHerSpeak rocketed to the top of trending lists. Memes sprouted instantly. O'Reilly mid-interruption frozen next to Crockett's calm stare, captions declaring "silenced by the truth." Celebrities chimed in, actors, athletes, and musicians retweeted the clip with fire emojis, calling her a voice of dignity in an era of noise. Journalists who once tiptoed around O'Reilly's dominance now marveled at the way his armor cracked in real time. Late-night hosts replayed the segment, turning the interruptions into comedic beats before cutting to Crockett's unflinching line. "Maybe it's not me you're afraid of, maybe it's the truth itself." The audience laughter always gave way to applause because everyone knew it was more than a punchline, it was a statement. News networks labeled it the sixth answer heard around America. Analysts dissected every second of the exchange, marveling at how swiftly Crockett shifted the narrative. Some called it a career-defining moment, others a generational one. Either way, no one denied its impact. But the most powerful reaction came not from pundits or celebrities, but from ordinary viewers. People across the country shared the clip with captions like, "This is why we need leaders like her," and "She just spoke for all of us who've been cut off, ignored, or dismissed." Teachers played it for students as an example of composure under fire. Parents showed their children, proud to point to a leader who met arrogance with dignity. For millions, it wasn't just entertainment, it was empowerment. The ripple effect spread far beyond the studio, as if Crockett's words had unlocked something that couldn't be contained. But the real significance of that moment went far beyond the studio walls. In the days that followed, Jasmine Crockett didn't treat her viral moment as a personal victory. Instead, she reframed it as something larger than herself. Every interruption she endured on that stage became a metaphor for the silencing so many Americans face in their daily lives. Women talked over in meetings, immigrants dismissed when sharing their stories, communities ignored when raising their concerns. Her message was clear: dignity is stronger than arrogance, and truth will always outlast bluster. She reminded the public that freedom of speech isn't just about the right to talk, it's about the right to be heard. And fairness isn't just a political slogan, it's a principle that lives or dies in the way we treat one another, even in moments of disagreement. Crockett's composure wasn't simply a debate tactic, it was an embodiment of perseverance, of what it means to stand your ground without losing your grace. Moments like these resonate because people are hungry for justice that doesn't come from shouting the loudest but from speaking the clearest. And they resonate because arrogance has too often gone unchallenged, because the bully's smirk has too often been mistaken for strength. Watching Crockett turn silence into power, millions felt a release of pent-up frustration, a surge of pride, and a renewed belief that truth can still pierce through noise. Her sixth answer became more than a viral clip, it became a symbol, a reminder that in America, the measure of strength isn't who interrupts the most, but who speaks with conviction and courage when given the chance. That night, Crockett didn't just reclaim her voice, she helped countless others believe that theirs still mattered. And as the applause of millions echoed across screens and timelines, a lesson lingered in the air. Arrogance may command the microphone for a moment, but dignity will always own the stage. 5 interruptions, 5 attempts to drown out a rising voice, and then came the sixth answer, the one that silenced arrogance and reminded millions that dignity doesn't just endure, it triumphs. What began as a lopsided clash of power ended as a stunning reversal, a moment so unforgettable it earned its title. Bill O'Reilly interrupts Jasmine Crockett 5 times, her sixth answer leaves millions stunned on air. We watched a familiar story, the bluster of a bully, the arrogance of someone convinced he could not be challenged. But what we witnessed next was something rarer, something deeply American, the calm strength of truth cutting through noise. In Jasmine Crockett's words, people heard their own voices finally breaking through, and in her composure, they saw proof that dignity can still win. And now the question is, what comes next? If you felt that spark, if you cheered, if you nodded, if you saw yourself in her fight, don't let the moment end here. Subscribe to this channel, share this story, and join a movement that believes in truth over bluster, clarity over arrogance, dignity over dismissal. Because sometimes all it takes is one answer to silence 1,000 interruptions.